Rain did not arrive with thunder. It arrived quietly, like a sorrow that had forgotten how to leave. Cold drops slipped from a gray sky and covered the abandoned trade road until the earth became a river of black mud. Broken wagon wheels leaned against fallen stones, and empty cages rocked gently in the wind, producing a slow metallic sound that echoed through the valley. Somewhere far away, wolves howled. Not with hunger, with warning. A young woman dragged herself through the mud, leaving a thin trail behind her. Her hands were bleeding. Her fingers shook every time they touched the frozen ground, yet she refused to stop. Every painful movement carried her another few inches toward the old stone markers that separated the slave routes from the northern Pack territory. She had forgotten what it felt like to walk without pain. Her name was Lyra. To the traders who owned her, she had never been a person. She had simply been Omega number 37, a worker too weak to carry heavy loads and too quiet to complain when the whip struck her shoulders. Years of chains had left one leg permanently damaged. Years of silence had taught her that hope was dangerous. Yet she kept crawling. Behind her, distant voices drifted through the rain. Search the river. She couldn't have gone far. If she's alive, bring her back. The words disappeared into the wind, but Lyra knew they were getting closer. She lowered her head and forced herself forward. One hand, then the other. One breath, then another. The border stones were still hundreds of steps away. To someone who could walk, they meant nothing. To her, they looked as distant as another world. A sharp piece of rock cut into her palm. Blood mixed with rainwater. She didn't even react. Pain had become so familiar that it no longer surprised her. She only paused when another sound reached her ears. Small cry. So quiet that it almost disappeared beneath the rain. Lyra closed her eyes. Maybe she imagined it. Then it came again. A frightened child trying very hard not to make noise. She slowly turned her head. An overturned wooden cart rested beside the road, one wheel completely broken after the storm. Underneath it, hidden by shadows and wet blankets, two frightened blue eyes stared back at her. Little boy, no older than 6. His face was covered in dirt, and an iron collar hung loosely around his neck. He looked at her the way abandoned animals looked at strangers. Terrified, ready to run, ready to disappear. Lyra glanced toward the voices behind her. If she kept moving now, she might still reach the border before the traders arrived. If she stopped, neither of them would escape. The sensible choice was obvious. She reached into her torn cloak and found the only piece of bread she had stolen before escaping. It wasn't much. Barely enough for herself. She broke it in half, then crawled toward the child. The boy immediately pulled back. "I won't hurt you," she whispered. Her voice sounded weak from days without water. He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on the bread. Slowly, Lyra placed it on the ground between them. The boy stared for several seconds before grabbing it with shaking hands. He ate so quickly that he almost choked. Lyra smiled. It was a tiny smile, one she hadn't worn in years. "What is your name?" she asked softly. The boy swallowed. "Finn. My name is Lyra." Silence returned. Rain continued falling around them. For the first time since escaping, Lyra forgot her own fear. She carefully removed her worn cloak and wrapped part of it around Finn's shoulders. "You'll be warmer. But you'll be cold." "I already am." The child looked at her with confusion. No one had shared food with him before. No one had given him anything without expecting work in return. He slowly reached for her injured hand. "You are bleeding." Lyra looked at the cuts and quietly nodded. "It will stop." Children believed adults, so Finn believed her. Then the voices became louder. "There! Someone moved this way." Horses. Several of them. Lyra immediately pushed Finn farther beneath the broken cart. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "don't come out." "What about you?" She looked toward the border one last time. "I'll keep them looking at me." Heavy boots splashed through the mud. 3 slave traders emerged from the rain carrying ropes and curved blades. Their leader laughed when he saw her. "I knew the cripple wouldn't get far." Another man stepped closer, and she found herself another little rat. Finn covered his mouth to stop himself from crying. The leader grabbed Lyra by the hair and forced her face upward. "You cost us 3 days." She didn't answer. The whip cracked through the air. Before it could land, everything became silent. Even the rain seemed quieter. One trader slowly looked toward the forest. Another took an uncertain step backward. From between the black trees emerged a massive wolf. Its fur was darker than the night sky, and its golden eyes never left Lyra. Then another appeared. Then another. Then a fourth. They were enormous. Too large to be ordinary wolves. Too calm to be wild animals. The traders suddenly forgot about their weapons. One whispered a terrified sentence. "Royal guardians." Every child in the northern kingdoms knew stories about them. The 4 wolves that served only the Alpha King's bloodline. Creatures that never approached strangers. Creatures that disappeared for years without explanation. Yet now they stood only a few feet away, watching a crippled Omega. The leader tried to recover his courage. "They're just animals." He lifted his whip again. The largest wolf took one silent step forward. No growl. No attack. Only a stare so steady that the man's hand began shaking. The whip slipped into the mud. None of the wolves moved toward Lyra. Instead, they quietly formed a circle around her. One stood between her and the traders. Another sat beside the broken cart where Finn hid. The third lowered its head until its nose nearly touched Lyra's injured leg, as if carefully inspecting the old wound. The smallest wolf simply looked at her. Its eyes held something impossible. Not pity. Recognition. No one understood it. Least of all Lyra. She lowered her gaze, refusing to believe any miracle belonged to someone like her. The traders slowly backed away. No amount of money was worth challenging the sacred wolves of the royal bloodline. Within moments, horses turned and disappeared into the rain. The valley became quiet again. Finn carefully crawled out from beneath the cart. He stared at the 4 wolves with wide eyes. "They saved us." Lyra looked at the silent guardians surrounding them. "No," she whispered. "I don't think they came to save me." The oldest wolf calmly walked toward the northern border, then stopped and looked back, waiting, as though inviting her to follow. Lyra took a slow breath and placed one trembling hand into the mud again. One painful movement, then another. Without making a sound, the 4 royal wolves matched her impossible pace, surrounding the broken Omega and the frightened little boy as the rain continued falling over the forgotten road, while somewhere beyond the mist, a kingdom unknowingly waited for the girl nobody had ever chosen. The rain never stopped. It followed Lyra and the little boy like a quiet shadow, washing from the road while leaving every memory untouched. Cold wind rolled down from the northern mountains, carrying the scent of pine trees and distant snow instead of smoke and burning cages. For the first time in years, Lyra could no longer hear chains dragging behind her. But freedom still felt like something meant for other people. She pulled herself forward one slow movement at a time, her damaged leg refusing to support her weight. Mud clung to her torn clothes, and every breath escaped in small white clouds. Beside her, Finn walked with tiny uncertain steps. Every few moments he looked over his shoulder. "Do you think they'll come back?" he whispered. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She looked at the 4 enormous wolves surrounding them. One walked ahead, one behind. 2 remained close enough that their black fur almost brushed against them. "They won't," she finally said. "How do you know?" She looked at the silent guardians. "Because even fear knows when to stop." Finn nodded even though he didn't completely understand. After a few minutes, his small legs became tired. Without making a sound, the smallest wolf lowered itself onto the ground. The child stared. The animal gently nudged him with its nose. "You want me to sit?" The wolf blinked once. Finn carefully climbed onto its broad back. Instead of moving away, the wolf stood slowly and continued walking beside Lyra. The little boy smiled for the first time since she had met him. "I've never ridden anything before." Lyra couldn't stop herself from smiling too. The expression disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared, but the oldest wolf noticed. Its golden eyes softened for a brief moment. Hours passed. The abandoned trade road slowly became an ancient stone path leading toward the northern border. Broken towers appeared through the fog. Old statues of wolves stood beside the entrance, their faces worn smooth by centuries of rain. Then another sound echoed through the valley. Horse hooves. Many of them. Within seconds, armored riders emerged from the mist carrying silver spears marked with the royal crest. Pack patrol. The captain immediately raised his hand. "Halt!" Every soldier prepared for battle. Their eyes widened at the unbelievable sight before them. 4 royal guardian wolves. A crippled Omega covered in mud. A frightened orphan child. An absolute silence. One young soldier whispered, "Those are the king's wolves." Another swallowed nervously. "They disappeared weeks ago." The captain slowly climbed off his horse. His hand rested on the handle of his sword. "Who are you?" Lyra lowered her eyes. "My name is Lyra. Why are the royal wolves following you?" "I don't know." The answer sounded honest. Perhaps too honest. Several soldiers exchanged suspicious looks. One stepped forward. "We should take her into custody." The moment he moved closer, the largest wolf calmly walked in front of Lyra. No growl. No exposed teeth. Simply stood there, like an unbreakable wall. The soldier froze. Every warrior in the Northern Kingdom knew the ancient law. Never challenge a royal guardian. If they chose someone, even the king would ask why before raising a weapon. The captain slowly lowered his hand. Something impossible was happening. And his instincts told him not to interfere. Finn hid behind Lyra. "Are they angry?" "No," she whispered. "I don't think so." The captain studied the girl more carefully. She wasn't dangerous. She was exhausted. Her hands were torn open. Her clothes were barely holding together. And yet she had wrapped most of her cloak around the child instead of herself. An older healer riding with the patrol quietly approached. Without asking permission, she knelt beside Lyra. "Oh!" The woman stared at her injured leg. This wasn't born this way. Lyra remained silent. The healer gently touched the old scars. They broke it and never treated it. Still no answer. The silence itself became an answer. Even hardened soldiers looked away. The captain finally spoke. "Bring a carriage." Lyra immediately shook her head. "No." Everyone stared. "You can't continue like this. I've spent years inside cages." Her voice stayed calm. "I won't ride inside one." The captain blinked. Then he looked toward the wooden carriage behind his men. Without saying a word, he ordered the doors removed completely. The roof was lifted away. The sides came off. Within minutes, nothing remained except an open platform. "There." Lyra looked at it for several seconds. "It isn't a cage anymore." Something unexpected happened. The oldest wolf walked to the platform, sat beside it, and waited. Almost as if approving the decision. Very carefully, Lyra climbed aboard. Finn sat beside her, still holding a piece of the torn cloak. The patrol slowly continued toward the capital. Villages appeared along the road. People stopped working to watch. Children pointed. Merchants forgot their conversations. No one had ever seen the royal wolves walking beside ordinary travelers. Rumors began spreading before the patrol had even crossed the first bridge. The wolves found someone. A mysterious Omega. Maybe she's a witch. No, maybe she's a lost princess. Perhaps the moon goddess sent her. Every mile created another story. Every village added another impossible detail. By sunset, the entire northern territory was whispering about the crippled girl protected by sacred beasts. Lyra knew nothing about those whispers. She was watching Finn sleep. The little boy had finally relaxed enough to rest with his head against her shoulder. His breathing was slow and peaceful. Carefully, she brushed damp hair away from his forehead. "You can sleep," she whispered. "I'll stay awake." The oldest wolf quietly walked beside the platform. Its golden eyes drifted toward Lyra's injured leg once again. Stayed there for a long moment, almost like a silent promise. Far beyond the mountains, inside a palace built from black stone and silver glass, another silence was breaking. A man who had not slept peacefully for years suddenly opened his eyes. No nightmare. No memories of war. No voices from the past. Only an unfamiliar feeling that someone had finally crossed a distance meant to separate two lonely souls. He sat in darkness without understanding why his restless heart had become strangely calm. Outside his chamber window, the moon appeared from behind the clouds. And somewhere on the long northern road, 4 royal wolves continued escorting a broken Omega toward a destiny that neither she nor her future king could yet imagine. Morning arrived slowly over the northern kingdom, but the royal palace never truly slept. Tall black towers stood above the clouds like silent guardians, their silver banners moving gently in the cold mountain wind. Snow rested on every rooftop, and long bridges connected ancient halls built by kings whose names had already faded into legend. Everything inside the palace moved with perfect order. Servants walked quietly. Soldiers changed shifts without speaking. Council members carried stacks of documents through endless corridors. Yet despite all its beauty, the palace carried a strange emptiness. People smiled less here. They laughed even less. Because the man who ruled it had forgotten how. Alpha King Cassian stood alone on the highest balcony, watching gray clouds roll across the mountains. He wore no crown. He never liked wearing one unless tradition demanded it. Instead, a simple black cloak rested over broad shoulders marked by years of battles and responsibilities. Many believed he was fearless. Few understood that fear had simply stopped showing itself on his face. The wind carried the scent of pine trees. Normally it brought nothing else. But this morning something felt different. For the first time in years, he had slept without waking from the same nightmare. No burning villages. No screams. No blood. No memory of the little sister whose hand had slipped away during the war. The silence should have felt comforting. Instead, it left him unsettled. Behind him, footsteps echoed across polished stone. His oldest advisor bowed respectfully. "My king." Cassian didn't turn around. "What is today's first problem?" The old man almost smiled. Cassian always asked that question instead of asking how the day was. "There are 3. Only 3. The eastern border requests additional soldiers. They will receive them. The Harvest Council wants permission to increase taxes. No. And..." The advisor paused. Cassian finally looked back. "And the royal wolves have returned." For the first time that morning, something changed in Cassian's expression. Not surprise. Attention. They returned. "Yes. Where?" The advisor hesitated. "They never came home." Silence filled the balcony. "They were found escorting someone." Cassian's eyes narrowed slightly. Escorting a crippled Omega girl. Another long silence followed. Every child in the kingdom knew the story of the royal guardian wolves. 4 ancient wolves connected only to the Alpha King's bloodline. They obeyed no command except their own instincts. Even Cassian never forced them to stay. Sometimes they disappeared for weeks, sometimes months, but they had never willingly protected a stranger. Never. They attacked no one. No. They chose to remain beside her. Yes. They refused to leave. Cassian turned back toward the mountains. His voice remained calm. "Bring her safely." The advisor blinked. "My king." The council believes she could be dangerous. Cassian stared into the distance. "A woman who can barely walk. They fear hidden magic. The wolves would know before we would." The conversation ended there. Cassian rarely repeated himself. The advisor bowed and quietly left. Only the wind remained. Far below, servants crossed the palace courtyard carrying baskets of firewood. Life continued as always. Yet something invisible had shifted. Inside another wing of the palace, the High Council had already gathered. Long wooden tables surrounded a circular chamber decorated with ancient wolf carvings. 10 noble leaders sat in expensive robes. None looked pleased. An elderly noble struck the table with his staff. "This is unacceptable." Another nodded. "A nameless Omega arrives protected by royal guardians. What message does that send?" A third frowned. "The people already whisper that fate has chosen her. We cannot allow rumors to grow." One woman leaned forward. "Then imprison her until we learn the truth." Several voices immediately agreed. Doors suddenly opened. Cassian entered without ceremony. Every conversation stopped. No one feared his anger. They feared his silence. The Alpha King walked to the center of the chamber. "What decision have you reached?" The oldest council member answered confidently. "The stranger should remain confined until her intentions are known." Cassian looked at him. "For what crime?" The room became quiet. "She has committed none." "Then why imprison her?" "Because uncertainty creates danger." Cassian slowly looked around the chamber. "When did fear become evidence?" Nobody answered. One noble finally spoke. "My king, appearances matter. A crippled slave appearing beside royal wolves will damage the dignity of the throne." Cassian's voice remained steady. "The dignity of this throne depends on justice, not perfection." The words settled over the chamber like falling snow. No one challenged him directly. But no one agreed either. Political tension quietly spread across the room. After a long silence, Cassian turned and walked away. The meeting ended without another sentence. Meanwhile, miles away from the palace, Lyra continued traveling with the royal patrol. The open platform rolled slowly over frozen roads. Finn remained asleep against her shoulder, completely trusting someone he had met only yesterday. She carefully adjusted the cloak around him. An elderly healer rode beside the wagon. "You should rest too." "I'm fine." "No." The woman smiled gently. "You're used to saying that." Lyra lowered her eyes. She honestly couldn't remember the last time someone had worried about her. The healer handed her a cup of warm tea. Lyra hesitated. "I don't have anything to give in return." The healer's smile became sad. "You don't owe kindness." For several seconds Lyra simply stared at the cup. Her hands shook slightly before accepting it. The warmth spread through frozen fingers. Something inside her felt unfamiliar. Safety. It almost frightened her more than pain. Ahead of them, the 4 wolves continued moving silently. The smallest occasionally looked back toward Finn. The oldest never stopped watching Lyra. The captain noticed it too. He rode beside another soldier. "I've served 20 years. So have I. Have you ever seen them behave like this?" The younger soldier shook his head. "No. They're guarding her. It almost feels..." He searched for the right word. "Personal." Neither man understood why. As evening approached, the palace finally appeared beyond the mountain cliffs. Silver towers reflected the setting sun until the entire kingdom seemed to glow. Finn slowly opened his eyes. "Is that where kings live?" Lyra nodded quietly. "I think so. Have you ever seen one?" "No." "Do you think he'll be scary?" She looked toward the distant palace, then toward the wolves walking beside them. "I don't know." At that exact moment, far above them, Cassian stood once again on the highest balcony. Without understanding why, his gaze drifted toward the northern road. Too far away to see anyone. Too far away to recognize a single face. Yet a strange feeling settled in his chest. Not destiny. Not certainty. Only the quiet sense that someone carrying unbearable loneliness was slowly making her way toward a place that had forgotten warmth. Neither of them knew it. Neither of them searched for it. But with every mile between the border and the palace disappearing behind them, two broken lives were moving toward the same silence, and somewhere in the fading light, the four royal wolves walked as if they had known the path all along. The palace gates opened without a sound. Two walls of black stone rose toward the cloudy sky, carved with ancient wolves whose silver eyes seemed to watch every traveler who entered. Long banners moved gently in the cold wind, and hundreds of lanterns glowed like quiet stars along the path leading toward the royal courtyard. Lyra stopped moving. Not because she wanted to, because she had never imagined a place like this could exist. For years she had known only wooden cages, muddy roads, and broken camps where every sunrise meant another day of labor. The polished stone beneath her hands felt so clean that she hesitated to touch it. Finn looked around with wide eyes. So many lights. His whisper echoed softly. One of the palace servants smiled at him. Another immediately stepped forward carrying a thick wool blanket. The servant carefully placed it around Finn's shoulders. The little boy froze. Nobody had ever wrapped him in warmth before. He looked at Lyra as if asking permission. She simply nodded. "It's all right." The boy held the blanket tightly and refused to let go. The four royal wolves walked through the gates without hesitation. Every soldier standing guard immediately lowered their weapons and bowed their heads. None of them bowed to Lyra. Yet none of them dared force her away while the sacred guardians remained beside her. Whispers began almost instantly. "Is that the girl? She looks like an ordinary Omega. Why would the royal wolves choose someone like her? Look at her leg." The words floated through the courtyard like cold wind. Lyra heard every one of them. She lowered her eyes and continued forward without responding. Years of humiliation had taught her that silence hurt less than arguments. An elderly woman wearing healer's robes approached slowly. Her white hair rested neatly behind her shoulders, and kindness filled her tired eyes. "My child," she said softly, "may I see your injuries?" Lyra instinctively stepped backward. The movement was so quick that everyone nearby noticed. The healer stopped immediately. "I won't touch you unless you wish it." Those simple words confused Lyra more than anything else that day. No one had offered her one in years. After several quiet seconds, she nodded. The healer carefully knelt beside her damaged leg. Without pulling or forcing anything, she gently examined old scars that crossed her ankle and knee. Her expression slowly changed. Not disgust, not fear, only sadness. "How long ago?" Lyra stared at the floor. "I don't remember." The healer closed her eyes for a moment. Some wounds healed. Some simply became part of a person's life. She looked toward the captain. "Prepare a room near the eastern garden." One noblewoman standing nearby frowned. "A guest chamber." The healer calmly shook her head. "A healing chamber." The noblewoman looked directly at Lyra. "She's only an escaped slave." The sentence hung in the air. Before anyone could answer, the largest royal wolf slowly stood between Lyra and the noblewoman. No growl, no movement, only silent protection. The noblewoman immediately stepped back. Servants exchanged surprised looks. The wolves had made their choice very clear. Inside the palace, long corridors stretched beneath crystal windows where pale afternoon light painted silver patterns across the floor. Finn walked beside Lyra, never letting go of her sleeve. Every few steps he stopped to stare at paintings, flowers, or statues. Everything felt magical. He pointed toward a fountain. "Look." Small birds were drinking from the water. "They're not afraid." Lyra watched quietly. Neither was Finn anymore. That realization warmed something inside her heart. A young maid arrived carrying fresh clothes. "They prepared these for you." Lyra looked down at the soft fabric. "They're too expensive. They belong to you now." "I can't accept them." The maid smiled. "Then think of them as borrowed until you decide." Lyra slowly accepted the bundle. She had forgotten how gentle people could sound. Hours later, after warm water and clean bandages replaced dirt and old blood, She barely recognized herself. The simple gray dress contained no jewels or embroidery, yet it felt lighter than every chain she had ever worn. Finn appeared wearing clothes several sizes too large. The sleeves covered his hands completely. He laughed. "I look funny." For the first time since leaving the slave road, Lyra laughed too. Only a little. Only for a moment. But several servants quietly smiled after hearing it. Meanwhile, news of her arrival spread through every noble hall. In a bright sitting room overlooking the gardens, 3 noble Omegas gathered around afternoon tea. One carefully placed her cup down. "So this is the famous girl." "Apparently. They say the wolves refuse to leave her." Another looked toward the window. "I heard she can't even walk properly." What an embarrassment. If the people start believing she's blessed, the royal family will look weak. None of them had actually met Lyra. Yet judgment arrived long before kindness. Not far away, Cassian listened to reports inside his study. Stacks of maps and law books covered the large wooden desk. The captain finished describing the journey, and the wolves remained beside her every step. Cassian remained silent. "And the child?" "He refuses to leave her side." "Does she seek attention?" "No, my king." "Power?" "No." "Wealth?" "No." The captain hesitated. "What does she seek?" The old soldier thought carefully. "A place where the boy can sleep without fear." Silence filled the room. Cassian slowly looked toward the window. Snow had begun falling outside. Very softly. Almost peacefully. He dismissed everyone and walked alone through the palace. Without planning it, his steps carried him toward the oldest part of the castle, the library. Rows of towering books surrounded warm fireplaces that had burned continuously for generations. Only one lamp remained lit. Near the far window sat Lyra. Finn slept beside her with his head resting against folded arms. A blanket had slipped onto the floor. Without waking the child, Lyra quietly picked it up and covered him again. Then she opened a worn storybook. Her lips moved silently as she read. Not for herself. For the sleeping boy. As though stories could still reach dreams. Cassian stopped in the shadows. He did not announce himself. He simply watched. There was no performance. No attempt to impress anyone. Only a tired young woman making sure an orphan stayed warm. Outside the library doors, the 4 royal wolves rested peacefully. Their eyes closed. Their breathing slow. The palace guards exchanged confused glances. Those wolves never slept inside the palace. Never. Yet tonight they looked completely at ease. Inside, the fire crackled gently. Pages turned one by one. Neither Lyra nor Cassian spoke. Neither even noticed the other. But for the first time since war had stolen his family, the Alpha King stood in complete silence without feeling haunted by memories. And for the first time since chains had stolen her freedom, Lyra sat in a room where no one ordered her to move. The night wrapped around the palace like a quiet promise. Neither of them understood why the silence felt different. Only the oldest wolf slowly opened one golden eye, looked toward the library door, and then closed it again, as if patiently waiting for 2 broken hearts to discover that healing sometimes begins not with words, but simply by sharing the same peaceful room. The inner gates of the palace did not open the way ordinary doors did. They did not creak. They did not groan. They simply parted, like the stone itself remembered who was allowed to pass. A deep silence followed Lyra's arrival into the inner courtyard, heavier than the wind outside. Even the air felt different here. Warmer but not in a comforting way. Controlled warmth. Like the palace was carefully deciding how much life it allowed inside its walls. Lyra felt it immediately. Not danger. Not safety. Something in between that made her shoulders tighten without reason. Finn shifted slightly beside her, still half asleep. One of the guards adjusted the blanket around him without speaking. The gesture was careful, almost hesitant, like even kindness had rules here. The platform rolled forward across polished stone. Every movement echoed softly. Too softly. as if sound itself had been trained to behave. Ahead, the path split into 3 directions. One led deeper into administrative halls, one toward the council wing, and one toward the healing quarters. The healer from the patrol stepped down from her horse. "This way," she said gently. Her voice was the first thing that felt normal since they had entered the palace. Lyra hesitated. Her eyes moved instinctively toward the wolves. They were still there. All 4. Silent. Watching. Not rushing. Not guiding. Just staying. The largest one met her gaze for a brief moment. No command. No instruction. Only presence. And somehow that was enough. Lyra allowed herself to be moved forward. The healing wing was quieter than the rest of the palace. Not empty. Just softer. The sound of running water echoed faintly from hidden channels in the walls. Warm light from glass lamps reflected off pale stone floors. The scent of herbs replaced the cold iron smell of the outer halls. Finn slowly opened his eyes fully for the first time. "Smells like outside after rain," he said quietly. The healer smiled. "That's intentional." Lyra looked at her. "Why?" "So the body remembers what peace feels like," the healer replied. That answer stayed with Lyra longer than expected. They stopped in front of a set of wide doors. No locks, no guards. Just wood carved with simple patterns of leaves and wolves. The healer pushed them open. Inside was a large chamber filled with soft beds, clean cloth and shelves of herbs. Sunlight entered through tall windows, breaking into gentle lines across the floor. It looked nothing like the world Lyra had known. And that was what made her stop at the entrance. "I don't belong here," she said quietly. The words were not dramatic, just certain. The healer turned slightly. "Neither does pain," she replied. That simple response left no space for argument. Inside the room, attendants moved carefully. One brought fresh water. Another prepared clean bandages. No one touched Lyra without asking first. Every action waited for permission. It unsettled her more than rough hands ever had. Finn clung to her sleeve. "Are we staying here?" he whispered. "I don't know," Lyra answered honestly. For a moment she looked back toward the doorway. The wolves were visible through the archway. Still there. Still watching. Still not leaving. The oldest one sat down slowly, like it had decided something. Lyra finally stepped inside. The moment she did, the healer approached again. "We need to treat your leg properly," she said gently. Lyra stiffened slightly. Her instincts reacted before her thoughts could. The healer noticed immediately and stopped. "I will not force you," she said again. Silence followed. Then Lyra slowly nodded. "Only if I can see everything," she said. The healer didn't question. "Of course." As the treatment began, Lyra kept her eyes open. Every movement was explained. Every cloth placed only after warning. No restraints. No pressure. Only care that waited instead of taking. It felt wrong in a way she didn't know how to explain. Because she had never been given control over her own pain before. Finn sat nearby watching silently. A young attendant placed a small wooden toy in his hands. He looked at it like it might disappear if he blinked. "It's yours," the attendant said softly. Finn didn't answer. But he didn't let go of it either. Outside the chamber, the palace continued its quiet life. But word of the arrival spread faster than footsteps. Within hours, whispers had reached the council wing again. "The Omega is inside the healing chambers. With royal approval. No formal declaration yet. That is unacceptable." Inside the council chamber, tension rose once more. Voices overlap. "She is influencing the wolves. Or being influenced by them. This is not natural behavior." "Then what is it?" No one answered that last question. Because no one liked the possible answers. Far above them, Cassian stood in his private corridor. He had not yet gone to see her. Not because he did not want to. But because he was listening. Not to the council. Not to reports. To something quieter. a pull that did not belong to logic. He stopped walking. His hand rested briefly against the cold wall. And for a moment the memory of that word returned. Mega. Injured. Protected. Life. Something inside him tightened. Not with anger. With recognition of imbalance. He continued walking. But not toward the council. Toward the healing wing. Inside the chamber, Lyra was being carefully bandaged now. Her leg had been cleaned properly for the first time in years. Old wounds were visible under soft light. Stories written into skin that no one had ever bothered to read. The healer worked slowly. "This pain," she said quietly. "You carried it too long." Lyra didn't respond. Because there was no answer she trusted. Finn leaned slightly closer. "Does it hurt?" he asked. She looked at him. Then shook her head gently. "Less than before," she said. It wasn't a lie. Just not the whole truth. A soft knock interrupted the room. Everyone turned. A guard entered. He looked uncertain. "His Majesty is approaching." The room went still. Even the attendants paused. Lyra's hands tightened slightly on the cloth around her. Not fear exactly. Not curiosity either. Something heavier. Expectation of judgment. The healer noticed. "You don't need to stand," she said softly. "I didn't ask to meet him," Lyra replied. "I know." Another pause. Finn whispered. "Is he the king?" Lyra nodded. The boy looked down at his toy. "Will he take us away again?" That question hit harder than anything else in the room. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Because she didn't know what kings did when they saw people like her. A few seconds passed. Then she spoke quietly. "I don't think I can be taken again," she said. Not because she was strong. But because something inside her had already broken beyond ownership. The doors outside slowly opened. A shift in air followed. Not loud. Not dramatic. But undeniable. Cassian entered the healing wing. He did not wear armor. Only dark clothing, simple and sharp. His presence changed the room without effort. Conversations stopped. Movement slowed. Even the attendants lowered their gaze instinctively. Except Lyra. She did not bow. Not out of defiance. She simply did not know how. Their eyes met. For the first time. And in that single moment, neither of them moved. Not forward. Not away. Just recognition of something neither had language for yet. Cassian looked at her injuries first. Not her face. Not her status. The damage. The truth written into her body. Then his gaze shifted slightly to the child. Finn held still. Then to the wolves visible through the window behind him. Still there. Still watching. Cassian's voice finally broke the silence. "Leave us," he said calmly to the room. No one questioned. One by one, attendants and guards stepped out. The healer hesitated only once, then followed. The door closed softly. Now only 4 remained. Lyra, Finn, Cassian, and the unseen presence of the wolves beyond the walls. Silence stretched. Not empty. Waiting. Cassian spoke again, quieter this time. "You were escorted by royal guardians." Lyra nodded slightly. "I didn't ask for them." "I know," he replied. That answer surprised her more than she expected. 'Cause he believed it. Finn shifted closer to her. Cassian noticed. His gaze softened just slightly. Not kindness. Not warmth. Something more restrained. Understanding of fear. Then Cassian looked back at Lyra. "You are not here as a prisoner," he said. "Was. Not unless you choose to be." The words landed differently than anything she had heard before. That word again. Lyra lowered her eyes briefly, as if trying to understand whether it was real or another test. Outside, one of the wolves exhaled slowly, like it approved something unseen. And inside the healing chamber, the first true tension between a broken Omega and an untouchable king finally began, not as conflict, but as the beginning of something neither of them had yet learned how to survive. The healing chamber did not return to normal after Cassian's words. It only became quieter in a different way. The kind of quiet that carries weight. Lyra still sat on the edge of the bed, her injured leg wrapped in fresh bandages. The pain was still there, but dulled, like something sharp had been carefully moved farther away instead of removed completely. Finn stayed close to her side. He had not spoken since Cassian entered. His small hand still held the wooden toy given by the attendants, but now his grip was tighter. Not fear exactly. Awareness, like even a child could feel when the world shifted. Cassian remained where he stood. He did not move closer. He did not step away. It was as if distance itself was part of his control. His eyes stayed on Lyra, not evaluating her like the council had done, not judging, observing, as if he was trying to understand something that did not fit into anything he had learned about the world so far. Finally, Lyra spoke quietly. "You said I'm not a prisoner." Cassian nodded once. "Yes." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. A history that refused to stay hidden. "Then why am I surrounded by guards I didn't choose?" Cassian's gaze did not change. "Because the kingdom reacts to what it does not understand." "And do you understand me?" she asked. The question was not bold. It was tired. Cassian did not answer immediately. For the first time, something like hesitation passed through his expression. Not uncertainty, but restraint. "I understand what I see," he said finally. Lyra let out a quiet breath. "That sounds like the beginning of a problem," she replied softly. A faint silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just real. Finn looked between them. He did not understand the meaning of their words, but he understood the tension. So he quietly moved closer to Lyra, pressing into her side without thinking. Cassian noticed. Something subtle shifted in his gaze again. The child was not afraid of him in the way most people were. He was cautious, but not broken by fear. That mattered more than it should have. Outside the chamber, footsteps approached. Controlled. 2 guards entered. Both bowed immediately. "My king," one said urgently. "The council requests immediate audience regarding the Omega." Cassian did not turn fully. "What about her?" The guard hesitated. "They believe her presence is destabilizing the royal wolf's behavior." A second voice added. "They are calling it an abnormal bond response." Lyra heard that. Even if she didn't fully understand the politics behind it, she understood tone. Blame. Cassian finally turned his head slightly toward the guards. "Leave." The guards froze. "My king." "I said leave." No raise in voice. No anger. Only finality. The guards bowed again and quickly exited. The room fell back into silence. But now it felt thinner. Pressured. Like something outside the room was pushing against it. Cassian turned back to Lyra. "They will continue to question you," he said. "I didn't ask for any of this," Lyra replied quietly. "I know." That same answer again. Simple. Certain. It unsettled her more than accusation would have. 'Cause it meant he was not guessing. He was observing. Finn tugged lightly on Lyra's sleeve. "Can we go home?" he whispered. The question hit the room harder than any political demand. Lyra's hand rested gently on his head. "Home is not something we can go back to yet," she said. Finn nodded slowly, even if he didn't understand fully. Cassian watched that exchange. Longer than before. Something in his expression softened, but not into emotion people could easily name. It was recognition of survival. Then he spoke again. "There is no home for either of you in the place you came from," he said. Lyra looked up at him sharply. "That is not your decision to make." Cassian met her gaze without hesitation. "No," he agreed. "But it is the truth I see." Silence again. But this time it was different. Harper. Because truth and comfort rarely coexist peacefully. Outside, the wind shifted against the palace walls. One of the wolves let out a low sound somewhere beyond the courtyard. Not loud, but intentional. Cassian turned slightly toward the window. The wolves were still there. Always there. Waiting. Watching. Then he spoke quietly, almost to himself. They have never chosen anyone before. Lyra frowned slightly. I didn't choose them either. Cassian's eyes returned to her. That is what makes it significant. The healer re-entered the chamber slowly, carrying a small bowl of medicinal herbs. She paused when she sensed the tension. I can return later, she said carefully. No, Cassian replied. Continue. Lyra did not protest. The healer resumed her work, carefully adjusting bandages. As she worked, she spoke softly, almost as if thinking aloud. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget, she said. But sometimes, it also remembers protection. Finn tilted his head. What does that mean? The healer smiled faintly. It means your body learns when it is safe. Cassian's gaze shifted slightly. Safety. A word that did not belong in most reports he received. But here it kept appearing. Outside the chamber, the atmosphere in the palace changed again. A council messenger was waiting in the corridor. He delivered sealed documents to another guard. Whispers spread instantly. The king is personally meeting her. For how long? Too long. Is he being influenced? The words multiplied like fire catching dry wood. Inside, Cassian finally stepped closer, not to Lyra directly, but toward the center of the room. He stopped a few steps away from her. Not invading, not distant, controlled middle ground. I will ask you something, he said. Lyra looked at him, her expression cautious but steady. Answer honestly. She didn't respond immediately. Then she nodded once. Cassian continued. Why did you survive when others did not? The question was not what she expected. Finn looked up at her too. Lyra was silent for a moment. Not because she was thinking of an answer, but because she was remembering. Cold nights. Voices telling her she would not last. Finally she spoke. I don't know if I survived, she said quietly. I just didn't stop moving. Cassian held her gaze. That answer did something subtle in the room. Even the healer paused slightly. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't heroic. It was real. Cassian lowered his eyes briefly, then spoke again. That is not weakness, he said. Lyra blinked slightly. Cassian continued. It is endurance. A silence followed that carried more weight than words. Finn leaned his head against Lyra again. Tired. Safe enough to relax. That small detail did not go unnoticed. Cassian looked at the child for a long moment, then back at Lyra. The council will attempt to move you tomorrow, he said. Lyra stiffened slightly. To where? Observation quarters. The word itself made something in her expression tighten. Cassian noticed immediately. And you will refuse, he added calmly. It was not a question. Lyra didn't deny it. Cassian continued. I will not allow you to be placed in confinement under false concern. That surprised her. She studied him carefully now. You are protecting me, she asked. Cassian did not answer quickly. Not yet, he said. That honesty landed heavier than reassurance would have. Because it admitted something unfinished. Something forming. Outside, the wolves shifted again. Closer this time. Like they had heard something important. The healer finished the last bandage and stepped back. You should rest, she said softly to Lyra. For the first time, Lyra did not immediately refuse. She looked at Finn. He was already half asleep again. Then at Cassian. Then at the door. I don't trust cages, she said quietly. Cassian met her gaze. Then don't enter one. Stay where you are. Silence followed. Not agreement. Not defiance. Something in between. Lyra slowly lay back, pulling Finn gently beside her. The room remained still. Cassian did not leave. He simply stood there for a moment longer. Watching. Not like a ruler. Not like a judge. Like someone witnessing the beginning of a question he had never been asked before. And somewhere beyond the walls, the royal wolves settled again. Quiet, aligned, as if the entire palace was slowly learning that something unfamiliar had already begun. and it could not be reversed. Night did not arrive in the palace the way it arrived in the outside world. There were no fading sunsets, no soft transition of light. Instead, darkness simply settled into the stone corridors like it had always belonged there. Torches along the healing wing burned steadily, their flames controlled, never flickering too wildly, as if even fire had learned discipline inside these walls. Inside the healing chamber, Lyra finally slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but enough that her breathing stopped carrying tension in every exhale. Finn was curled beside her, one arm still wrapped around the wooden toy. His face had softened in sleep, the kind of expression that only appears when the mind finally stops expecting danger. The room was quiet, but not empty. Cassian stood near the far side of the chamber. He had not moved from there for a long time. He did not sit. He did not speak. He simply watched, not in a way that felt invasive, but in a way that felt like awareness itself had taken human form. The healer had already left hours ago, leaving behind only soft herbs and clean bandages. Even the attendants had stopped entering unless absolutely necessary, because no one dared disturb the silence between the king and the Omega. Lyra shifted slightly in her sleep. Cassian's gaze moved immediately. Reflex, not concern he understood yet, just attention. Her hand tightened briefly around the edge of the blanket, then relaxed again. Cassian's expression did not change, but something inside him did. Slowly, quietly, like a thought forming without permission. He turned away from her and walked toward the window. Outside, the palace courtyard was barely visible under the pale glow of moonlight. The royal wolves were there again. All four. As if they had always been part of the architecture. The largest one sat facing the window. And even from here, Cassian could feel its awareness. Not obedience. Not instinct alone. Recognition. Cassian exhaled slowly. "You are choosing without explanation," he murmured under his breath. The wolf did not move, but its gaze shifted slightly upward, as if it understood, as if it agreed. Behind him, Lyra stirred again, but this time she did not wake. Cassian turned back. Something about her presence had changed the air inside the room. Not in a dramatic way. In a way that made silence feel shared. A knock came at the chamber door. Dark. Controlled. Cassian did not react immediately. The door opened anyway. A royal messenger stepped inside quickly, bowing low. "My king," he said urgently, "the council has issued a formal request for immediate containment authorization." Cassian's eyes narrowed slightly. "Containment," he repeated quietly. "Yes, your majesty. They believe the Omega's presence near the royal wolves may disrupt bloodline stability." Cassian turned fully now. "And who authorized this belief?" The messenger hesitated. "The council majority." Cassian stepped forward slowly. Each step measured and hurried. "And my authority." The messenger lowered his gaze further. "Not included in their proposal." A silence followed. A dangerous kind of silence. The kind that decides futures without words. Cassian spoke calmly. "Leave." The messenger bowed quickly and left the room. The door closed. Softly. But it felt heavier than stone. Lyra did not wake during any of it. But Finn did. He stirred slightly, eyes half open. He saw Cassian standing near the window. Then closed his eyes again, as if deciding the world was still safe enough to sleep through. Cassian watched that small act. And something unfamiliar tightened in his chest. Trust without reason. That should not exist in his world. And yet, did. Morning came slowly after that. But the palace never truly changed with time. It only shifted tasks. Servants entered quietly to replace lamps. Guards rotated positions outside the corridors. Council members gathered again in distant halls, their voices already building arguments before Cassian even arrived. Inside the healing chamber, Lyra woke first. Not suddenly, not in panic, just slowly, like someone returning from a place they never fully left behind. Her eyes opened to the same ceiling, same light, same silence. Finn was still asleep beside her. That realization alone made her remain still for a moment longer. Then she noticed Cassian, still there, standing near the window, watching the outside world. He had not slept, or if he had, he did not show it. Lyra slowly sat up. Her movement made a soft sound. Cassian turned immediately. Their eyes met. No tension, no fear, just awareness. "You didn't leave," she said quietly. Cassian replied without hesitation. "No, was." Lyra adjusted the blanket around Finn carefully. Kings usually leave when people sleep. Cassian's gaze did not shift. Then most kings do not understand what they are protecting. That answer made her look at him longer, trying to find intention behind it. But there was none she could clearly name. Only honesty. Finn stirred again and slowly sat up. He looked around, then smiled faintly when he saw Lyra. "Good morning," he whispered. Lyra brushed his hair back gently. "Good morning." Cassian watched that exchange again. And again, something in him shifted slightly. Not emotion. Recognition of continuity. A life that was not centered around war. A knock interrupted the moment. This time louder. More formal. Before Cassian could respond, the door opened. 3 council guards entered. Behind them stood an elderly noble. His presence alone carried authority shaped by decades of political survival. "My king," he said carefully, "the council requests your immediate presence." Cassian did not move. The noble continued. "It concerns the Omega." Lyra felt the shift instantly. Even without knowing details, she could feel it. Cassian finally spoke. "She remains here." The noble hesitated. "With respect, Your Majesty, that is not within current council agreement." Cassian turned slightly. "Then the agreement is incomplete." A tense silence followed. The noble stepped forward. "The wolves are behaving unpredictably." Cassian's eyes narrowed slightly. "They are behaving as they choose. That alone is the problem." Cassian took one step forward. The air in the room changed instantly. Not louder, not sharper, just heavier. "Explain," he said. The noble swallowed slightly. "They are protecting someone outside royal lineage. That has never happened before." Cassian replied quietly. "Then history has changed." The noble stiffened. "That is not acceptable to the council." Cassian's voice remained calm. "The council does not decide what is acceptable to nature." Silence. Lyra watched all of it quietly. She did not fully understand politics, but she understood tension. Finn stayed close to her again. The noble tried one last time. "If she remains here, unrest will spread." Cassian finally looked directly at him. "Unrest comes from fear," he said. "And fear comes from misunderstanding." "I will deal with both." The noble hesitated, then bowed stiffly and left. The guards followed. The door closed again. Silence returned. But now it felt fractured. Lyra spoke quietly. "They are talking about me like I am a problem." Cassian turned slightly toward her. "They are talking about what they do not understand. That doesn't change what it feels like." Cassian did not respond immediately. "No," he agreed. "It does not." That honesty again. Finn tugged at Lyra's sleeve. "Are they going to take us away?" Lyra hesitated. Before she could answer, Cassian spoke. "No." The single word cut through uncertainty. Finn blinked. Cassian continued. "Not without my decision." The boy seemed to process that carefully. Then nodded once, accepting it in a way only children can accept authority they don't yet question. Outside the window, one of the wolves stood. Still watching. Still waiting. Cassian turned toward it. Then back toward Lyra. Something inside him settled into a decision not yet spoken aloud, but already forming. "You will come with me," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him. "Where?" Cassian's gaze held steady. "To the council chamber." You will hear everything they intend to decide about you. Lyra's expression tightened slightly. I don't belong in their arguments. Cassian replied calmly. You are already inside them. Silence. Finn looked up. Will it be scary? Lyra looked at him first, then at Cassian, then back to Finn. I will be there, she said softly. Cassian watched her for a long moment, then nodded once. Not approval, not command, acknowledgement. And as the morning light slowly shifted across the palace walls, something irreversible began to form, not in action yet, but in truth finally stepping closer to being spoken aloud. The council chamber was not built for comfort. It was built for judgment. Tall circular walls of black stone rose upward into a dome carved with ancient wolf symbols. Each symbol represented a law, a war, or a sacrifice the kingdom had survived, but none of them represented mercy. Light entered through narrow crystal slits high above, cutting the room into cold geometric shadows. The air always felt heavier here, as if the walls remembered every argument ever spoken inside them. Today, the chamber felt heavier than usual, because something uninvited was about to walk in. Lyra stood at the entrance. For a moment she did not move. Finn held tightly onto her sleeve again, his small fingers gripping like he feared the room might swallow her if he let go. Cassian stood beside them, silent, controlled, unshaken. But his presence alone made the guards at the entrance step aside without question. Not because they trusted him, because they feared contradicting him. A deep stone door opened slowly. The sound echoed like a distant warning. Cassian stepped forward first, then Lyra, then Finn. The moment they entered, the room shifted. Not physically, politically. Every seated council member turned their gaze toward them at once. Whispers began immediately. That's her. The Omega. She looks weaker than expected. She is the one the wolves followed. Lyra felt every word like pressure against her skin. But she did not stop walking. Cassian did not look at the council immediately. He guided them forward until they reached the center circle. Only then did he stop. Finn stayed close to Lyra's side. The boy looked around nervously, taking in the rows of older men and women dressed in heavy robes of authority. To him they looked like shadows pretending to be people. Cassian spoke first. You requested her presence. A council elder stood slowly. My king, he said carefully, this is not a matter of request. It is a matter of kingdom stability. Cassian replied calmly. Stability is not threatened by a child and an injured woman. A murmur spread through the chamber. Another council member leaned forward. With respect, Your Majesty, the issue is not her condition. It is the royal wolves. At that, the room grew quieter. Cassian's gaze sharpened slightly. Explain. The elder continued. They have abandoned protocol. They refuse separation. They act without command hierarchy. Cassian answered without hesitation. They were never bound by command hierarchy. That statement caused immediate reaction. A noblewoman spoke quickly. Then they are acting on instinct alone. That makes them unpredictable. Cassian turned slightly toward her. No, he said. It makes them honest. Silence dropped again. Lyra stood still through all of it, listening but not interrupting. Finn leaned closer and whispered, Why are they angry? Lyra didn't answer immediately, because she didn't have a simple answer. Finally she said softly, Because I'm here. Cassian heard her, but he did not correct her. The council elder struck the floor lightly with his staff. This is exactly the concern. Her presence is altering royal behavior. Cassian finally stepped forward one pace. And what behavior should remain unchanged, he asked. No one answered immediately. He continued. Wolves that protect the weak. Or councils that fear what they cannot categorize. Attention spread across the room. The elder frowned. This is not about emotion. It is about law. Cassian replied immediately. Then present the law she has broken. Silence. Long. Uncomfortable. Finally, she is an Omega without registration, someone said. Another voice added quickly, escaped slave origin. A third, unverified identity. Cassian listened to each statement, then spoke quietly. So far I hear only origin, not crime. The chamber grew uneasy. Lyra lowered her eyes slightly. Not from shame, from memory, Cassian noticed. And for the first time in the chamber, his voice softened, not emotionally, but in control of tone. Continue, he said to the council. An elder stepped forward. If she remains near the wolves, public belief may shift. Some may think she is chosen. Cassian tilted his head slightly. And if they believe that? The elder hesitated. It could destabilize authority structures. Cassian responded calmly. Authority that collapses under belief was never stable. A silence followed that no one dared interrupt. Finn tugged at Lyra's sleeve again. Can we leave? He whispered. Lyra looked down at him, then up at Cassian. Cassian spoke before she could. No. That single word silenced even the council. He continued. You will hear what is being said about you. Fully. Lyra's expression tightened slightly. I don't need to hear people decide who I am, she said quietly. Cassian met her gaze. You already have, he replied. That answer landed deeper than anything else in the room. 'Cause it was true. The council had already spoken. In prisons, in chains, in silence. The elder raised his voice again. Then what is your position, my king? All eyes turned to Cassian. He did not rush. He looked at Lyra, at Finn, then briefly toward the unseen windows where the wolves would be watching even now. When he spoke, the chamber held its breath. My position, he said calmly, is that I will not allow fear to make decisions in this kingdom. Was. Not anymore. The room stirred. A noble stood quickly. Then what do you propose? She remains untested, unverified, uncontained. Cassian interrupted. She is not a threat. The noble argued. We cannot know that. Cassian's gaze hardened slightly. Then you do not understand how I judge threats. Silence again. Lyra finally spoke, quietly but clearly. I am not here to be judged. All eyes shifted to her. Even Cassian turned slightly. She continued. I didn't choose the wolves. I didn't choose this palace. I didn't choose your arguments. Was. Her voice stayed steady. I only chose to keep a child alive. Finn looked up at her at that moment. The chamber went still. Because nothing in the council agenda accounted for that. Child. A reason not tied to politics. Cassian watched her carefully now. The elder tried again. Emotional reasoning does not replace law. Cassian answered immediately. Law without humanity is just structure. He stepped forward again. I will make this clear. The room tightened. Cassian's voice remained calm, but absolute. She is under my protection. A wave of reaction followed instantly. But, Cassian raised a hand slightly. And my authority does not require council approval for protection. Silence fell sharply. The elder stepped back slightly. Lyra looked at Cassian. Not with gratitude, not with trust, but with something more complicated. Understanding that protection from power still came from power. Finn whispered. Are we safe now? Lyra hesitated, then said softly, for now. Cassian heard that. And for the first time since entering the chamber, something in his expression shifted slightly. Not disagreement, recognition. The council slowly settled into uneasy silence. The debate had not ended. But it had been interrupted by something stronger than argument. Decision without permission. Cassian turned slightly toward Lyra. You may leave this chamber, he said quietly. Was. But you will not be sent away. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Finn tightened his grip on her sleeve again. They turned, and began to walk out. Behind them the council did not stop them. But the silence that followed was not acceptance. It was the sound of a system realizing it had just met something it could not easily control. And as the doors slowly closed behind Lyra, Finn, and the king's shadow of authority, the royal wolves outside the palace lifted their heads at the same moment, as if something inside the kingdom had just changed direction, and no one inside the chamber yet understood where it would lead next. The corridor outside the council chamber felt colder than before, not because the temperature had changed, but because silence followed them like something alive. Lyra walked slowly, Finn still clinging to her sleeve. Her steps were careful, not just because of her injured leg, but because her mind was still inside the chamber they had just left. Words kept echoing there. Unverified. Contained. Unstable influence. She had heard worse in her life, but never in front of someone who had the power to change it. Cassian walked a few steps ahead. Not rushing. Not waiting. Just present like a moving boundary between danger and safety. Finn finally spoke softly. Are they still angry? Lyra looked down at him. I think they are confused, she said. About me. About everything, she corrected gently. Cassian heard it but did not turn. They passed tall stone pillars carved with ancient wolf symbols. Guards stood at attention but none dared speak. Some lowered their eyes as Cassian passed. Others stared at Lyra like she was a question they had not been trained to answer. At the end of the corridor, Cassian stopped. Lyra almost stopped too, then realized he had not turned toward her. He was looking out through a narrow window slit. The kingdom stretched below. Silent, structured, controlled. But something about it felt thinner now. Like glass with a hidden fracture. Behind them, a council aide appeared quickly, bowing. My king, the council will request another session tonight. Cassian did not move. Let them, he said. The aide hesitated. And the Omega. Cassian finally turned slightly. She is not a topic, he said. She is present. The aide bowed again and left quickly. Lyra watched him go. Then she spoke quietly. They will not stop. Cassian replied without looking at her. No. That honesty again. Finn shifted closer. Will we stay here? He asked. Cassian finally turned fully now. Yes. Lyra looked at him. You decide that so easily. Cassian met her gaze. No, he said. I decide it because leaving would be easier. That answer surprised her. Because it wasn't authority. It was burden. A distant sound echoed through the palace. Wolves moving in the courtyard below. Finn smiled faintly at the sound. Lyra noticed. You like them, she said softly. He nodded. They feel safe. Cassian looked toward the sound as well. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed through his expression. Recognition. Not of power, but of alignment. Then the moment passed. And he spoke again. This kingdom will resist what it does not understand, he said. Lyra responded quietly. Then let it resist. Cassian glanced at her. You are not afraid of that. She looked down at Finn. I've already lived through things worse than being misunderstood. Silence followed. A different kind this time. Not tense, just real. Cassian turned slightly toward the courtyard again. The wolves were still there, waiting. He spoke almost to himself. Then we will see what breaks first, he said. Lyra didn't ask what he meant, because part of her already understood. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everything the kingdom believed could not change. And somewhere deep in the palace, something old and rigid finally began to feel the first crack of uncertainty spreading through its foundations. Night settled over the palace, but this time it did not feel completely still. Something had changed. Not loudly, not visibly, but in the way guards shifted their weight more often. In the way servants spoke in shorter sentences. In the way doors closed a little faster than usual, as if the palace itself was beginning to feel uneasy inside its own order. Lyra stood near the window in the healing chamber. Finn was asleep again, curled under a thick blanket. His breathing was steady now, but his hand still held onto her sleeve even in sleep, like his body refused to believe safety could last without holding onto it. Lyra did not move her hand away. She just watched him. Cassian stood farther back in the room. Zoe's not sitting, not leaving, just there. The silence between them had changed after the council chamber. It was no longer unfamiliar. Had started to feel structured, like something unspoken was forming into shape. Outside, the wind shifted. And then the wolves arrived. Not loudly, not dramatically. They simply appeared beneath the moonlight in the courtyard below the window. All four. Perfect spacing. Perfect stillness. The largest one lifted its head toward the window. Lyra noticed immediately. Cassian noticed a second later. "They're here," Lyra said softly. Cassian stepped closer to the window. He did not call them. He never did. But they came anyway. The oldest wolf held Cassian's gaze for a moment, then slowly turned its head toward Lyra. A long silence followed. Cassian's expression did not change, but something inside his attention sharpened. "That is the third time tonight," he said quietly. Lyra looked at him. "Third time what?" "They are not just guarding you," Cassian replied. "They are responding to you." Lyra frowned slightly. "I didn't do anything." Cassian's eyes stayed on the wolves. "That is exactly why it matters." Finn stirred slightly in sleep but did not wake. One of the younger wolves stepped forward in the courtyard, then stopped. It lowered itself slowly, not in submission, in calm acknowledgement. Lyra watched it carefully. "Are they supposed to do that?" she asked. Cassian answered quietly. "No, was. That behavior has never been recorded." Lyra looked down at Finn again. "They're just animals," she said softly. Cassian's voice stayed calm. "No," he replied. "They are not." The wind moved again through the courtyard. The wolves did not leave. They stayed, watching, waiting, like something inside them had already decided where the center of loyalty now pointed. Lyra stepped back from the window slightly. "It feels like they're choosing something I don't understand," she said. Cassian turned his head slightly toward her. "Or something the kingdom has refused to understand." Silence followed. Heavy, clear. Outside, the largest wolf finally lay down. Not facing the palace walls. Not facing the exit. Facing the window. Facing Lyra. Cassian noticed. And for the first time, he did not immediately interpret it as duty or instinct. He considered something else. Finn murmured softly in his sleep. Lyra gently adjusted the blanket over him. Cassian spoke quietly, almost like a conclusion forming in real time. "This is no longer about protection," he said. Lyra looked at him. "Then what is it about?" Cassian's gaze returned to the wolves. "Recognition," he said. "Was. And the kingdom will not know how to respond to that." Outside, the wind carried through the palace once more. But the wolves did not move. And inside the healing chamber, silence deepened. Not as absence, but as the beginning of something neither law nor fear could easily name anymore.